Programmable control devices. Today, we are looking at programmable control devices and how industry moved from hardwired relay logic to microcontrollers and programmable logic controllers. On the left, you can see the relay logic jungle, where every function is literally a physical wire path. On the right, you can see a tiny programmable board, where the wiring is mostly software. The big idea is simple. The behavior of the system can be changed without rebuilding the entire control panel. By the end, you will be able to explain why programmable logic is so powerful and what problems it solves in the real world. Slide 2. The core problem: hardwired versus programmable logic. Hardwired control is brutally honest. If you want different logic, you must physically rewire the circuit. That means opening enclosures, moving conductors, changing terminals, and then retesting everything. That also means downtime, higher labor cost, and more chances to introduce wiring mistakes. Programmable logic flips that. The inputs and outputs can stay the same, but you change the logic in software. So instead of rebuild the panel, it becomes update the program, then verify the change. Two approaches: microcontrollers versus programmable logic controllers. There are two major families here: microcontrollers and programmable logic controllers. A microcontroller is basically a complete small computer on a single integrated circuit chip. It is usually programmed with text-based code, and it shines inside embedded products like appliances, vehicles, tools, and smart devices. A programmable logic controller is built for industrial work, where wiring is rugged, inputs and outputs are modular, and reliability is king. Programmable logic controllers typically use ladder diagrams, which were designed to feel familiar to relay logic electricians and technicians. Historically, programmable logic controllers took off in the late 1960s when manufacturers needed a faster way to change automation than rewiring relay panels. Anatomy of a microcontroller system. Here is a microcontroller wired to real components: a power source, an input button, and an output light-emitting diode. That light-emitting diode needs a current-limiting resistor so the output pin is not overloaded. Without that resistor, the microcontroller output can try to source too much current and get damaged. On the input side, notice the pull-down resistor. A pull-down resistor forces the input to a definite low state when the button is not pressed, so the input does not float and act haunted. This is the difference between a clean digital signal and a troubleshooting headache. Emulating basic logic gates. On the left, the two switches are in series, which behaves like an AND function. The output becomes true only when switch A is true and switch B is true. On the right, the two switches are in parallel, which behaves like an OR function. The output becomes true when switch A is true or switch B is true. In a microcontroller, those same behaviors are created in software by checking input states and deciding what the output should do. That is a theme in this whole lesson. Physical wiring can become logical relationships inside code. Implementing truth tables in code. A truth table is just a map. For every combination of inputs, it tells you what the output must be. Here we have 3 inputs, so we have 8 possible combinations to consider. One approach is to target the ones, meaning you write logic for the combinations where the output should turn on. Another approach is to target the zeros, meaning you describe when the output should be off, then invert the result. Either way, you are translating a truth table into a set of clear decisions the microcontroller can execute. This is how you go from logic theory to a working machine. State detection and memory, up counters. Counting button presses sounds easy until you remember one annoying detail. A button press lasts longer than one program scan. If you simply look for "button is pressed," you may count multiple times for a single press. The fix is state tracking, meaning we remember the last scan, and compare it to the current scan. We only count when the signal transitions from low to high, which is called the rising edge. This is a simple form of memory, and it is the foundation of counters, one-shots, and lots of industrial logic patterns. Manipulating time, on delay and off delay. Timer's industrial control is obsessed with timing, delays, minimum run times, debounce, and sequencing. A common mistake in beginner code is pause and wait, which freezes the processor and makes everything unresponsive. A better approach is non-blocking timing, where you store a start time and keep checking whether enough time has elapsed. Many microcontroller platforms include a running clock measured in milliseconds since power-up. So instead of stopping the program, you let it keep scanning while time quietly accumulates in the background. That is the same mindset as programmable logic controller timers. Keep scanning and let time-based logic decide when outputs change. Transitioning hardware, the MSP430. Moving from hobby platforms to professional microcontrollers often means more direct control of the hardware. Instead of friendly helper commands, you work with registers that directly control entire ports of input and output pins. That is where bitwise operations come in. You can set or clear specific bits without disturbing the rest of the register. The big win is efficiency and precision, especially when you need fast, deterministic behavior. Think of it like this. Higher-level commands are easy to read, but register control lets you drive the hardware like a manual transmission. Driving real-world loads. Start-stop motor control. A microcontroller output pin cannot directly power a motor, a relay coil, or most industrial loads. So we use interposing hardware, like a transistor that can switch higher current. The microcontroller provides a small control signal to the transistor, and the transistor energizes the relay coil. Now look at the protection diode across the relay coil. When a coil turns off, it produces an inductive kick that can destroy electronics, so the diode gives that energy a safe discharge path. Notice the separate supplies idea. You can power the load side with a higher voltage supply, while the microcontroller runs on a lower voltage supply, while still sharing a common ground for reference. Reading the real world. Analog inputs. Digital inputs are just on and off, but the real world is usually analog. Pressure, level, flow, temperature, position. A microcontroller uses an analog to digital converter to translate an input voltage into a digital count. With a 10-bit converter, the count range is 0 to 1023. That means each count represents a small slice of the full-scale reference voltage, like 3.3 volts. In this diagram, a potentiometer acts like a voltage divider, so turning it changes the voltage at the analog input. The microcontroller reads that count and can make decisions based on it. Analog controlled automation. Once you have an analog count, a common control strategy is threshold logic. For example, above 1/3 of the supply voltage, you turn on the first light, and above 2/3, you turn on the second light. That is basically a simple two-level comparator system implemented in software. This slide also introduces timer interrupts, which are a way to trigger actions at regular intervals without pausing the main program. Instead of waiting around for an analog conversion, a background timer can restart sampling periodically and keep the system responsive. This is one reason programmable control scales up so well. You can do sensing, logic, timing, and communication without everything tripping over everything else. Talking to other devices. Universal asynchronous receiver. Transmitter. Serial control systems rarely live alone, so we need ways for devices to talk. A universal asynchronous receiver transmitter, often called UART, is a very common serial communication method. It sends a digital word 1 bit at a time on a single wire, using a shared timing rate called the baud rate. A typical setting is 9,600 bits per second. The line sits in an idle high state, then drops low to mark the start of a message frame. That simple framing lets another device lock onto the timing and decode the bits reliably. Visualizing serial data. Here is what serial data actually looks like on an oscilloscope: voltage versus time. The frame begins with a start bit, which is a deliberate transition low. Then the data bits follow, usually with the least significant bit sent first. Some configurations add a parity bit, which is a simple error check. Finally, the stop bit returns the line to high, which resets the receiver for the next frame. When you understand this waveform, troubleshooting serial problems becomes way less mystical and way more measurable. Summary and best practices. Hardware rules first. Always use pull-up or pull-down resistors on inputs so signals do not float. Always use current-limiting resistors on light-emitting diode outputs to protect the microcontroller output pins. Always use flyback diodes when switching inductive loads like relays and motors. Software rules next. Track state so you detect edges, not just continuous button presses. Use non-blocking timing so the processor stays responsive while timers run. Use bitwise control when you need precise register-level behavior on professional microcontrollers. Thanks to Tony Kuphaldt and the open-source community for making high-quality technical education materials available to everyone.